Joining us from there is Roger Parrino, New York's Commissioner of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. Roger, thanks very much for joining us. So I want to start with you by looking back. You were at the heart of the storm in the New York Police Department during 9/11. 16 years later, what do you most remember about that day?
What I remember most, the sounds of the bodies when they landed, that noise. I have no memory of the noises of the two buildings collapsing, but the memories of when the bodies hit the street and the roofs of the adjoining buildings, that's what I remember. I remember the smell and the taste of what I ended up swallowing when I got buried. But and I remember most how good people were afterwards, and how the citizens of New York came together, and the citizens of America and the world came together to be supportive of what happened that day.
After that day, Roger, that changed the notion.
What are we going to talk to her about?
Americans. After witnessing 9/11 firsthand from inside law enforcement, and in all the years since in counterterror, what do you see as the biggest challenge that you face now in Homeland Security?
The biggest challenge we face in the United States is to remember that it happened, that evil is always lurking, and we have to always be on guard for evil to rear its ugly head. That's what Americans constantly have to be reminded of.
So post 9/11, one of the key failures exposed was a lack of communication and cooperation between intelligence bodies. That problem, as you know, is still something that Europe is very much contending with. So in your eyes, has it improved? How has it changed?
So it's changing because we talk about it, because we try to correct it, but it's always going to exist. But as long as we're talking about it and trying to correct it, I realize that Europe is having that issue, but even in America we have that issue, and the crosstalk between America and Europe is an issue. So it's always going to be existence, but as long as we always admit that there could be a problem, we're going to be ahead of the curve on that.
You mentioned that kind of crosstalk. What level of cooperation or communication even is there today between Homeland Security in the U.S. and those agencies in Europe?
I think there's a lot more cooperation and talk and negotiations on what type of information that we can share with one another and still be true to our country's interests.
Despite some increased cooperation, though, in counterterror, it seems to still always be a race to adapt. And with terror groups themselves adapting so quickly, how can law enforcement and counterterror agencies keep up?
So we just have to keep, if you look at today's examples, there's more examples in Europe of what's happening than there is in America. So for America, it's a little bit easier because we can see the trends and the patterns that are developing, and then we can come up with some anti-terrorism type things to prevent it or to minimize some of these risks.
Roger, what kind of trends specifically stand out for you right now?
Well, the trends of using vehicles in crowds, the trend of recently with the new issues come out about taking derailing trains. These are the kind of things that we are watching for in the United States.
We have seen those kinds of attacks often here in Israel, certainly in Europe over the last couple of years. In that kind of attack, if we're talking about an individual who sort of decides on his own accord to carry it out, how do you prevent that? Can you?
Well, that's a two-pronged answer, I believe. So one thing is the person just doesn't wake up. That person is becoming unhinged. He or she is being radicalized. And there's a circle of friends and family and acquaintances that are probably witnessing this unhinging. And if they can try to get that person help or try to report them to the authorities is one way. The other way, we have to re-examine how we do things in urban centers about putting up a little bit more protection between, say, the sidewalk and the street so that vehicles can't just randomly run over sidewalks.
Roger, I want to broaden the picture a little bit. After witnessing 9/11 up close in the NYPD, you ended up also doing 4 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. So many years later, how do you reflect on those wars today that really in many ways have morphed but are still ongoing?
So I did it as I was a civilian counterinsurgency and law enforcement professional assigned to the Marine Corps as a civilian. And how do I reflect on that today is that we still are learning how to fight an insurgency, let alone to fight terrorism. And it's a constant battle for us to keep up. We left Iraq without the cooperation of staying in Iraq. We withdrew from Afghanistan. Possibly we're going back to Afghanistan, but at least we never totally left Afghanistan. I'm not quite sure on the strategy or what is the long-term game here, other than we are trying to do what we think is best, and that's the best I can tell you.
Commissioner Roger Parrino, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.